Well, hey, folks, welcome to Cowboy State Daily's podcast, The Roundup. I'm your host, Wendy Core. So glad you could all join us. I am very excited about our interview today because we get to talk to one of Wyoming's premier artists, premier sculpture artists today. And his name is Chris Navarro. You have probably heard his name, but I'm telling you what, if you've not seen his large form bronzes, you are missing out. And so I'm just tickled to be able to talk to Chris about his artwork, about his background, about his inspirations. And so we're just going to go straight to Chris. So Chris, hello, welcome to Cowboy State Daily's The Roundup. We're so glad to have you with us.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
Chris, tell me a little bit about what it is that you are most excited about right now. What's happening in your life right now and in your work right now that you're excited about?
Well, I've just bid a bunch of monuments, so I'm hoping that some of them are going to come in. That's the thing about it, I'll bid a dozen monuments to hit one, but it's been that way the whole career. So, in the wintertime, I own a gallery in Sedona, Arizona. I've owned this gallery for 23 years now. My wife and I have built a home here too, so we winter in Sedona, Arizona. And I have a large studio here also, so I continue to make art here, and I still cast all my sculptures in Wyoming. I have two foundries that I'm using now. I'm using Cody, which is Coleco Foundry, and I'm also using Eagle Bronze in Lander, Wyoming. So all my bronzes are actually cast and made in Wyoming. But I wintered down here a few years ago, and I thought it's pretty tough to beat the winters in Arizona. And I like to rope, so I bring my Arizona is a team roping capital. Wickenburg, Arizona is. So I rope during the winter also. It's kind of my little bit of fun things I get to do. So I was a rodeo cowboy. I still got that in my blood a little bit. I still like to compete in roping. So that's what another reason I like to come to Arizona. But Wyoming's my home, and it's always going to be my home.
Let's talk about that. You grew up here in Wyoming. Tell me about what you not.
I did not really grow up in Wyoming. I moved to Wyoming when I was 18. My dad was a professional soldier. So my dad is a veteran of Korea, World War II, and Vietnam. And so his life was in the military his whole career. He started out as a private and in World War II. And then when he finally retired, he was a lieutenant colonel. And he went through and put himself, got a college degree, and became, he was in the Army and then transferred into the Air Force after Korea. He spent a year in Korea during the war, and he told me he'd see the planes flying above, and he said, I'd rather be up there than down here. So I kind of grew up everywhere. I mean, I was born on an air base. I graduated high school at an air base, and then I came to Wyoming in 1974. And I came from San Antonio, Texas. That's really where all my family's from. Both my parents were raised in San Antonio, Texas. And I remember I bought an old car for $250. It was a 66 Plymouth. Loaded everything I had in the trunk, and I drove up to Casper, Wyoming. Never even been to Wyoming before. And I started going. That's when I went to Casper College. I really wanted to be a professional bull rider, and I started riding bulls when I was 16 in Bronx. And that's how I really want. I thought, there were guys making a living at it back then, but not much of a living. And then, but it was my passion. I kind of got hooked on it. So Casper College had was known for having great rodeo teams back then. And so Dale Stiles was the coach back then, and I thought, well, Wyoming's a cowboy state, and I'm a cowboy, and I want to go to Wyoming. That's how I ended up there.
So you got to Wyoming for rodeo. You graduated from Casper College?
Yes. I went to 76. Was my last year at Casper College. I didn't even major in art back then. I didn't even know you could make a living as an artist. So my major was animal science technology. And then when I started becoming an artist, I started going back to Casper College at night, when I'd get off work, and I started taking painting, drawing, photography, creative writing. I took a lot of things that I knew that I would need to help me with my art career. Casper College has always been important in my life, and I lived in Bailey Hall for 2 years. You're old when your dorm room doesn't even exist anymore. They tore it down.
Oh, so. Yeah. No, I know. I went to Casper College as well, and it hurts my heart when that stuff happens. But yes, I didn't even realize Bailey's gone
anymore. And I lived my first 2 years in Wyoming there, and then I tried to rodeo for right after I got out of college. I rodeoed for 9 months straight, and that's all I did. And when I tell people I quit riding, I was so poor I couldn't afford to pay attention. So I said, I
So
got to make a living. And my dad wasn't too thrilled about it, to be honest with you. So, I went and got a job working in the Wyoming oil field was booming back in 1977. So that's when I started working in the oil field.
what was it that made you pick up a sculpture for the first and say, I think I want to try sculpting? What made you say, I want to pick up this piece of clay and transform it into something?
Well, what happened is it was all by accident because, I quit rodeo and, riding rough stock, and I thought something was missing in my life. And then I went to, I was living with a guy in his room. He was my roommate. And we were out hunting out by Lost Cabin, Wyoming. And he said his cousin was a caretaker for this sculptor named Harry Jackson. And he said, we're going to stop by there and eat lunch. So we drove in there, and man, I was just blown away. He had a studio in his home there, and he had all these beautiful art and Navajo blankets. He had a huge lever action, Winchester collection. And I mean, I was just walking through and going, man, this guy's got some amazing things. And then I saw this bronze that he had. It was called Two Champs. And it was a guy riding a bucking horse, a steamboat. It's a famous sculpture. It's called Two Champs, like I said. And I said, man, that's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I'd like to own that. And the guy told me, I go, well, it's $35,000. And this was in 1979. So, and I'm working in an oil field, and I'm not making $35,000 a year. And I'm thinking like, wow, that's a pretty lot, man, but that's so beautiful. Maybe I could make me one. And art was always my favorite subject in high school. And it never even entered my mind that you can make a living. And I was seeing what a good living this guy was making as a sculptor. And I thought, well, I'd like to give it a try. So the very next day I went down to Godek's art store on 2nd Street. And I talked to John Godek first time I met him. He was a nice guy. And I said, I want to be a bronze artist and sell me all the supplies. And then I drove over to the Natrona County Library, and I went to the librarian and asked her to give me all the books they had on sculpting. I took them home and started sculpting, made my first sculpture.
That is a plug not only for local influences, but also for the power of libraries.
Oh,
I think
yeah.
that's
And
fabulous.
I'm still a big fan of the Natrona County Library. I've done some things to help them. I helped design one of their mobile libraries, the artwork on it, and I've donated some work to help them because I went over there one time because before the internet, I mean, this is the library, and now the internet's changed things a lot. But back in 1980, there was no internet. So, and the library was so good to me down there. They would get, like, if I wanted any book in the United States, they'd go get that book for me, and it was just, I kind of built a relationship with the director there and some of the librarians. And I've always been a big supporter. That's one thing about Casper. We probably have one of the better libraries in the whole state. It's real fortunate that we have it there.
I agree. It's a fantastic library there. You're talking about things, Chris, and I just want to stop and make a point about the fact that you give back. It is important for you to support the things that are important to you. And so tell me a little bit about ways that you have done that. I know that there's some sculptures that you've given to schools. There are sculptures that you have commissioned for people that
Yeah.
commemorate things that are the Sacred Heart of Jesus is, to me, a fantastic example of kind of giving back.
Well, you know what? Casper's my hometown, and I wanted to leave as many sculptures as I can. So there's been a lot of sculptures that I've done at cost or less than cost, just to get them done. One that comes to mind is Spirit of the Thunderbird. We did that back in it was the 50th anniversary. So, Casper College was my my alma mater, I guess, and Bill Landon, him and I went to college together, and in fact, he was our dorm room monitor. And he came to me after I did the Lane Frost sculpture. He said, Chris, you ever thought about, Casper College having their 50th anniversary? It'd be cool if we did something like a big sculpture. You got any ideas? And we sat down. So we went to Casper College, and they didn't have the money to make the sculpture. So I said, well, we'll raise the money by selling maquettes. The same thing I did for the Lane Frost. Because sometimes, I tried to I commissioned myself to do my first big public monument was since I was a bull rider, and the first sculpture I ever did was a bull rider. Lane Frost got killed in Cheyenne in 1989, and he was the 87 world champion, and he was only 25, and he was a legend, and he didn't do anything wrong. He just got in the wrong place, and that bull killed him right there in the arena. So my first idea was to build the Lane Frost Monument, and I did that in 1992. I started on that sculpture. I was 36 years old at the time, and it was my first big public monument, and I was excited about it. And then when I gave my presentation to the Cheyenne Frontier Days Rodeo Committee, they turned me down, and I said, "Well, I'll raise the money," and because I needed to raise about $150,000 back then, and I needed to make 150 small maquettes, which I ended up, it was an addition of 250, but that's just to break even, just to pay for the monument and the 150 castings. And, I always figured if I do these things, the money will come eventually. So that's how I did it. So I raised it. And next thing I know, that those maquettes all sold and took off, and people responded because, I was giving them a pretty nice something for the $1,000. You go ask people today, hey, give me $1,000. And they're going to say, yeah, yeah, okay. You say, hey, I'm going to give you this. I'm going to give you something that's worth $1,500, and you give me $1,000, and you'll get your name on the bronze plaque saying you're one of the people that donated it. And that's how it came around. Well, it was the first time I'd raised the money to do something like that. And then I did it again with Casper College with the Spirit of the Thunderbird. And we raised all the money by selling maquettes. We just a lot to the break-even point where we just had to have the money because, bronze foundry casting is very expensive. And so I also did that with the big Mustang in Natrona County at the high school. It's in the end zone, and both my kids graduated. My wife graduated from NC, so it's kind of cool that that piece is there. And then I did another piece that cost was the St. Anthony's Joy at St. Anthony's School. I mean, and I think I did the one with Matthew Shepard Memorial. It was, I mean, I didn't really. I mean, I need money to work and continue what I'm doing, but it's not the main driving force of my life. And now I've got those big sculptures, and they're always going to be in my hometown, and they're going to be there for a long, long time.
Yes, they are. That's one of the great things about your sculptures, Chris, is that they are so visible to all of us here in Wyoming. You're talking about the Lane Frost Memorial. You're talking about, again, I come back to the T-Rex that you
Yeah.
did at Casper College recently. Your large form bronzes are so huge. One of the things that you and I had talked about last year, or maybe it was earlier this year, about the lighting that you're using and incorporating into some of your sculptures now, whether it's the Sacred Heart of Jesus, whether it is the T-Rex there at it's the museum there
The Tate
in
Museum on
Casper, the
Casper
Tate Museum.
College.
Yeah.
Well, both of
Tell me
those,
about that, because that's just fun. People
well, I've only
don't
done
do
two.
those things.
I know I've only done two sculptures of light radiating out of them, and both of them were commissioned by a sweet little old lady named Mary Alice Tobin. She passed away right before I finished the third commission she had for me, and and she was, I mean, she's probably about 4'10" and just a nice. I mean, she wanted things done her way though. So the first time I met her, she was for the T-Rex sculpture, and she goes, I want you to do a dinosaur, and I want light to radiate out of it. And I thought, wow, a dinosaur. I said, well, I'm going to do a dinosaur. I'm going to do a T-Rex. And if I got to have light coming out of it, it's got to have negative space in it. And the only way I go, well, I'll make one half skeleton and one half flesh. And that's how I came up with that concept. It was all from her words, just mentioning to me, I want to do a dinosaur and the light's got to come out of it. Well, she liked that sculpture so much that when the next year she calls me and says, hey, I'd like to do one. I want to leave something to Casper, the city of Casper. And that's when she came up with the idea of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. She wanted me to do a big sculpture of Jesus with his arms opened up wide, blessing and welcoming the people of Casper. And she wanted light to come out of that. And that's why I came up with the Sacred Heart. And it's kind of cool to drive by it at night and see the light coming out of it. So that's, like I said, the two pieces I've done were both because Mary Alice Tobin wanted light coming out of them. And I thought it was a cool idea, and it was a challenge to make them that way. Plus, it gave them a unique twist that, not a lot of sculptures have light coming out.
That's exactly what I was just going to say, is that you're kind of taking the traditional bronze sculpture and you're adding to it. You're making it yours, and very specifically and uniquely yours. What are some other ways that you've done that, Chris, that somebody can look at a Chris Navarro sculpture and say, that's Chris Navarro?
Well, I like my sculptures to have a little different take on them. Like the first piece I ever put in Casper was Eagle Against the Sun. It's down there on First and Center Street, and that was commissioned by a local resident too. She wanted to memorialize her son was killed in an airplane crash in Alaska. So I came up with this design of Eagle Against the Sun using that big abstract circle. I like the circle in a lot of my sculptures. In fact, I'm working on some sculptures now that have the circle in them. the circle is a pretty tough design to beat. And so I just like mine to have a little bit of different, unique twist to them. So like Essence of Rex is very different. I've never seen a sculpture that's half flesh and half with light coming out of it too. And my take on Jesus is very different. And even St. Anthony's Joy, I have him where, I used to throw my kids in the air and it would make them so happy, and so it's called St. Anthony's Joy, and he's throwing baby Jesus up in the air like you do with your little kids, and he's catching him, because all the ones I'd seen of St. Anthony, he has the Bible and the lilies, and they're in the sculpture, but he's set them down on the ground while he picked baby Jesus up and thrown him up in the air. I like to have just a little bit of a different take on it. I even did a sculpture that's reversible. It's called Duality of the Bull and the Bear, and it's about the bull and the bear stock market. So one way you flip it over and the bear's putting it on the bull, and then you flip it back over and the bull's beating the bear up. So
how do you figure this? I mean, that takes some engineering.
Yeah, it takes a little engineering, but it's all imagination, I mean, I don't know how my mind works all the time, and I try not to overanalyze it. So sometimes these ideas come to me in my mind. Right now, I'm trying to do a monument here in Sedona. I submitted it for it's called Dreamcatcher. And the reason I came by, I was driving on my way back here to Arizona, going through Page, Arizona, and there's all these Navajos have little shops that they sell their jewelry on, and they had this great big one with maybe a 12-foot tall dream catcher, and there was 2 ravens sitting on top of it. And I'm driving by and I'm hauling my horses and I'm going about 70 miles an hour, and I go by and I can't pull over and stop. And I remember that picture, and I kept thinking about it. I go, that would make a really cool sculpture. So you never know how these ideas come to you. So I'm trying to do a monument of that. I mean, I'm submitting it and going to make a dream catcher, make it out of steel, and then put a bronze raven on top of it. Because, I don't know, that image kind of works together in my idea. You never know where these ideas strike you. Just like my wind turbine sculpture deal. I wish that's been a struggle, but most things in life that are hard to do are worthwhile. But I sure have got a lot of no's on that project so far.
You just segued into where I was going to go. I was going to ask you about the wind turbine projects, and this is something that's got dual purpose. Not only are you creating a unique sculpture, you're doing it to recycle wind turbine blades.
That's correct.
So tell me a little bit about how you got inspired to kind of take that and run with it.
Casper Star Tribune. They have a picture on there of a great big D9 cat. It was an aerial shot, and it's a pretty famous picture now because if you put it in there, and it shows this big D9 cat out at our landfill bearing these blades, and these blades are huge. They were so they cut them into 3 lengths, so they're like 40-foot lengths, or about 120-foot long, the blades that they were burying out there. And I just saw all that material being just thrown away, and I thought. So I started researching. I said, man, that's a lot of material, man. I mean, maybe you could take that material and make some sculptures from it. So my mind started working like that. I started doing some sketching. Then I did some maquettes. And then I started contacting some energy companies. And I was thinking why don't you give me those blades? And, because they were spending quite a bit of money to bury them. And because I went out to the landfill and checked all those blades out, and they're already pretty much hammered and destroyed because they're just dumping them off flatbeds and throwing them on the ground and having a cat bury these blades. They're burying them in layers. So they have a lot of room out there, and now they've got, I don't know, acres of those blades buried out there. And those blades are never probably going to decompose that I can think of. So I thought, well, there's got to be a better way to do this than that. And that's what I came up with. Maybe I'll, make some sculptures out of them. So I couldn't think of anything. What's more powerful than taking something destined for the landfill and turn it into a beautiful piece of art?
What are your concepts for these sculptures, for these large form sculptures? It's hard to do on a podcast, but we might be able to put those pictures into our video here too.
Yeah, I'll send you some images of them. Well, the one that I've got to go ahead, and I'm trying to do it with the Platte River Trust, is Wind Cathedral. And that's where I'm just taking when they cut the blades, they cut them in like 40, 45-foot lengths. So I'm going to take 45-foot lengths, and I'm going to interlock them together at a probably a 45-degree angle. And you're going to be able to, it's going to be on the bike trail. You're going to be able to ride your bike and walk through them. And it's called Wind Cathedral. So it's a tier system where you go through. And the one I really wanted to build was the one after Stonehenge. I was going to make a replica of Stonehenge before it deteriorated, and it's going to be 108-foot diameter. I mean, I've given I don't even know how many presentations I've given on this, half a dozen at least. And I finally got a yes with the Platte River Trust, but then I'm still working with the companies, and I'm finding out all these things about these blades. They don't want to give you the blueprints on them, and that's a problem. And then another problem is they're worried about some liability, and it's always difficult when you're working with a committee of 12. A committee of 1 is when I usually get things done.
Sure.
But I haven't given up on it. I'm still working on it. In fact, I've put a lot of time, money, and energy into this. I've made 5 bronze maquettes of the 5 different designs that I have. I have a wind lodge. I have wind's hinge, and then wind cathedral. And then I'm gonna try to do. I'll send you copies of all the designs I've got. But I've cast 4 of them into bronzes. So I've got one in my studio. One I got where the sun's coming up, and it's like the rays of the sun. I mean, I think there'll be some great designs. You're not going to please everybody, that's for sure. But you know what? You got to do what's in your heart. And I wish my intuition wouldn't have got a hold of me on this one, because it's been a real struggle, to be honest with you. It's been a lot harder struggle than I thought it'd be. I thought, well, these people say I'm going to take care of get rid of some of their blades. They won't have to pay to bury them. Maybe I'll build something cool. But it seems like I don't know. And when you're an artist, you got to deal with a lot of no's in your life. You got to deal with a lot of rejection. And I've always tried to make rejection work for me. So like I tell people, just because you say no doesn't mean I can't do it. It just means I can't do it with you.
That's right. That's awesome. Excellent. I'm so sorry that it's not worked out with these wind turbines, but I'm so glad you're not giving up on it yet.
Oh, I'm committed. I've told everybody I'm going to do it. And I've always been pretty proud about keeping my word. And I've been working with Angela Emery, and I've been keeping her informed, because I saying this is, and she's been kind of going through the struggle with me a little bit, trying to get these wind turbine blades given to us so we can go ahead and do this. That's the main problem right now. Is they say they want to give us the blades, but they just haven't done it. And it seems like there's always come up with a reason not to. So I'm still hopeful. I think they're going to be building more of these big wind farms in Wyoming, and there's going to be some more waste, because those wind blades, they only last 15 to 20 years. It's not like they have an indefinite time. But I'm going to make them stationary, so they should last for hundreds of years. Is what I'm hoping. They're going to be. You're going to have to paint them every 10, 15 years, keep them maintained from the weather. But they're pretty tough. They're designed to spin a couple hundred feet up in the air, no matter how strong the winds are. So I don't know. I'm optimistic.
I like it. That's good. You've done so many different types of media. You've mixed media. You're wanting to mix the wind turbines with the bronze. You've mixed bronze with steel. Where do you see your next project? I know you're talking about Sedona. You're talking about the Dreamcatcher. What are some of the things you have to have a whole list of ideas in your head?
I know it. I got enough ideas probably to keep me busy for the next few years, for sure. The problem is, I've been doing this full time. I'm going to be 38 years now, and I'm going to be 68 next month. So I don't know how much physicality, building big sculptures. I spent a lot of time on scaffolding and ladders, and every time I'm in one of these, I go, man, I just don't see the end in sight real quick. But months later, it slowly comes in. It's just like, how do you begin a journey of 1,000 miles? You take the first step, and that's kind of always gets you through it. And the thing that's so satisfying about doing big monuments instead of like tabletop sculptures is that that it's going to be out in the public for everybody to see. And the great thing about bronze, it's going to last. I mean, they have bronzes that are 5,000 years old that were made in China. And to know that, my bronzes are going to be around 5,000-10,000 years from now, that's pretty inspiring, keeps me wanting to do more. Because, I could retire right now if I wanted to, but I don't want to.
Good. We don't want you to. We don't want you to.
I think you retire, that's when you get old.
Yes, you're right. Give us just a glimpse into the process, start to finish, from the first time that you hold the model in your hand, the blank piece of clay in your hand, to the finished bronze. It's been to Coleco Foundry. It's been to wherever you're going to have it done, to
Well,
where
usually
it's
what happens,
mounted. Well, how long does it take?
well, usually I try to do one monument a year because they take a long time. And so what I'll do is I'll make a study piece. It's called a maquette. And I'll make a sculpture maquette. And I usually cast them in bronze also. So like when I did, let's just take Spirit of the Thunderbird. So I made an 18-inch tall maquette. And then I enlarged that maquette. This is back in the olden days before they had computers working to help you do this. So I made I had a lot of access to oil filled pipes, so I'd make a big steel armature, and then I had a guy that would bring in a urethane foam machine, and he'd spray the foam onto my armature, and then I'd carve all the foam back, and then I'd put a layer of clay on it, and then I'd sculpt the clay and make it into the sculpture. And I started out everything with a height gauge and a metric grid. So when I would get everything proportional wise, then you put all your equipment away, and then you just start eyeballing it and sculpting it by hand. And then after you get that done, you have to cut. You'll shim the sculpture and cut it into segments. Because like the essence of Rex, the big T Rex, that was hitting over 100 molds. So each of those has to be molded, and then you make a silicon rubber mold of the monument. It's called the mother mold. And that's how you can do limited editions. But each one of them's handmade. So you pour waxes at 180 degrees into the molds. And then when you get the waxes out, you take all the imperfections out of the wax. It's called chasing waxes. So when you get all the imperfection out, because your bronze is going to look is going to be as thick as the wax, and it's going to have any of the defects or the detail of the wax. So then you put these into dip vats, and these are the ceramic shell. That's why it's called lost wax casting. So every time you see a big monument or any size bronze, there's a wax replica that's destroyed in the process. So you go from a positive. I make my originals out of clay. I make a mold out of silicon rubber, pour waxes in there. Now I have another positive image. Now I put a ceramic shell mold around so it has to have at least about 8 coats of shell on it. You got to let each, that's why it takes a long time to make bronzes. And then you pour the molten bronze in at close to 2,000 degrees. And that's why the ceramic shell mold can contain the heat. And it has to be vented and piped. It's an art form in casting for sure. And then you destroy the shell mold. So you destroy the wax and you destroy the shell mold every time you cast a sculpture. Now, people are always asking why bronze is so expensive to make, just because all the labor that's involved in it. And the foundry men are definitely artisans in their own right, because it's a lot of work to do these. And then you weld the sculpture all back together with silicon bronze rods, and then it's like putting a big puzzle back together. So you'll know that you have plate 1 and 2 go together, and 3 and 4. Then you kind of like number them all, so you assemble it, and then you see all the weld lines in there, and then you got to go back and grind all the weld lines smooth and put the texture back in. And then the final is you put the patina on there, which is a chemical reaction of oxidizing the metal, and you put it on with a torch after you sandblast it. And then you have your finished bronze. It's just that easy.
It's that easy. That's fascinating. I think for anybody who has not seen the process, I've been fortunate and have been to Coleco Foundry and seen the process in the various stages. So I've had a
I
chance
have a
to
video out on it that shows the process. In
Oh,
fact,
very good.
I have a YouTube channel. I probably have 140 videos. That's another thing. You got to wear a lot of hats when you're a sculptor. I do my own photography, my video work, do my narration, I do my writing. I create, I kind of, the best way to show sculptures on the internet is really with video. So I rotate those sculptures while I'm talking about them, and people can see them from all angles. That's the great thing about sculpture. It's 3-dimensional. It's like life, it's not like a painting. And there's another great thing about it is bronze is very durable, strong metal. In fact, I've had several of my sculptures be in house fires, and the sculptures have survived when everything's been burnt to the ground. And the sculptures needed new bases. It needed to be repatinaed and sandblasted. But the basic sculpture was still there. It was still salvageable.
And it's a legacy. Chris, we're running out of time here, but this has been a fascinating conversation. Tell us about your website and where we can go to see your videos and to see the process of what you do to create these amazing works of art.
Well, I have a pretty good website. It's called chrisnavarro.com. I first got my first website back in '96, so I've been in the website business for a bit. And I've got a YouTube channel. It's just Chris Navarro Studio. Uh, and I've got, like I said, I got 140 videos that I've made on there. And I've written 4 books also. And my books are at the Natrona County Library.
There
If you don't
you
want to
go.
buy one, you can go check one out.
That's great. Chris, thank you so much for your time. We are anxious to see what you have next coming up. And so we'll keep an eye on your website and on your YouTube channel. I'm assuming you got Facebook and everything as well.
Oh yeah, Facebook's good. And I wanted to talk about one more thing because Casper is my hometown. I've got 16 outdoor sculptures in Casper as of today. I hope to put another dozen up before I leave this world. And if anybody's interested in having another sculpture and wants to work with me, especially in Casper, I'm kind of bending over backwards to make sure that these get done. So contact me. I'd love to make some more sculptures. And I've got 10 large pieces that are limited editions. And I have that's one of the reasons I have my gallery in Sedona. It's a huge, I have a good sculpture garden. So I got like 9 big pieces out in front of my gallery in Sedona. And I'm in other galleries in Wyoming. I'm in the Bighorn Gallery in Cody, Wyoming. I'm in DeSelm's Fine Art in Cheyenne, and I'm in Mountain Trails Gallery in Jackson Hole.
Well, we know where to find your work then, for sure.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. And so do our listeners and our viewers here. Chris, thanks so much. And please keep that artwork coming. It's inspiring and it's really, truly Wyoming.
Well, I plan on doing this until I can't do it no more, probably when I'm dead. So.
Well, we hope that's a long time coming.
I do too.
Thank you, Chris, very much. And folks, thank you for tuning in to The Roundup, a Cowboy State Daily podcast. We're sure glad that you tuned in this week. Stay tuned. We will have another great guest next week. Check out cowboystatedaily.com. Sign up for our free daily newsletter at cowboystatedaily.com and get all of the great stories and people coming right to your inbox. So thanks a lot, Chris, and thank you folks for tuning in. Take care.
See ya.